Often, behind closed doors, or with very little attention drawn to their cases, women are being killed by men close to them. Violence against women and girls has been described by those in power as an epidemic, and yet so often, these women are dying despite reaching out for help.
How can any mother comprehend and ever get over that? To lose your daughter, but then to know it was so preventable.
I'm just in disbelief that someone can see someone's record of domestic abuse, and we didn't know any of this.
My name's Amelia Beckett. I'm an ITV News journalist based in Yorkshire. Over the past few months, I've been on a journey to find out just how many women here are being let down by the very police forces designed to protect them. This is an investigation uncovering what happens when these women aren't listened to. This is Unheard Voices. Huddersfield, 2019. A 21-year-old student from Leeds is killed in broad daylight. Bethany Fields had been setting up for a music event near the town centre when her ex-partner stabbed her to death in the middle of the street.
Bethany was a beautiful soul, a beautiful young lady. She had a wonderful character, quirky, comical, and there's nobody I love and respect and admire more than my daughter. And I miss her so much every day.
Bethany had begun a relationship with Paul Crowther in 2017. He had mental health issues which she tried to help him with, but he became threatening and controlling, and in June 2018 she ended their relationship.
2 days to coast to coast, in a late night cycle practice.
By August, Bethany had gone to West Yorkshire Police scared for her life, telling them how Crowther had been abusive and described being obsessed with killing someone. But the officer who took her statement had only been in the job without supervision for 2 weeks. Rather than assessing Bethany as high risk, they wrongly recorded her as medium. 4 weeks later, she was dead.
I looked at my mobile phone and there were 2 missed calls from my ex-husband. I says, "Where are you?" He says, "I'm at West Yorkshire Police Station." I says to my partner, "We're going to have to go to West Yorkshire Police." Went into this room and I just kept saying, "Just tell me, please, 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 just tell me she's all right." And then he said the words I'll never forget: "Your daughter did not survive her injuries." And I just said, "What has he done?" I just said, "That's that Paul Crowther, isn't it?" And they just hung their heads in shame. And I said, "She came to you for help." And they put their heads down. Yeah.
It's now been revealed that over the previous 7 years, Paul Crowther had been arrested 9 times under the Mental Health Act. He'd been the named suspect in domestic incidents with 2 previous partners, and 3 other people had made complaints about his threats in the 3 weeks before Bethany's death.
I just wish she were here now.
Bethany even told police herself he should be sectioned, but he never was.
Do you feel that the authorities failed Bethany?
Definitely. Absolutely, 100%. It's just, how can any mother comprehend and ever get over that? To lose your daughter, but then to know it was so preventable. It's crushing, it's devastating, it's just, we're broken forever. Broken forever. I have no future, Bethany has no future, her father has no future. Robbed. Completely robbed of her future at 21-year-old.
West Yorkshire Police told us they have accepted and implemented all recommendations made in the IOPC investigation and domestic homicide review. They've improved their risk assessment processes and are working to improve understanding of perpetrator offending behaviour. But our research, in collaboration with the charity The Femicide Census, has found Bethany was one of at least 18 women killed by a man since 2019, already known to police forces in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. At least 15 of those women had gone to the police themselves, and at least 4 of the men were on bail at the time they committed the offence. One of those men was Daniel Bolton. He murdered his ex-partner Bethany Vincent and her son DJ at their home in Louth.
Bethany was a great mum. DJ was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, and she just took it in her stride and she did everything she could for him. He was such a happy little boy. Always, always put DJ first. Always.
Bethany had begun a relationship with Daniel Bolton in 2019, but within months he'd become controlling and abusive. His brutal attacks were often fueled by a hatred towards DJ.
I love you.
Bethany reported Bolton to the police multiple times. He had a violent history and she was advised to take out a restraining order, but he repeatedly broke it. In one weekend, he bombarded her with 900 messages. The next day, he walked 30 miles across Lincolnshire, broke into her home and stabbed Bethany and DJ to death.
I'm just in disbelief that someone can see someone's record of domestic abuse against a police officer, stamping on a police officer's head, even attacking strangers in the street. He'd been 8 years in prison and we didn't know any of this. We didn't know any of it until after the event.
So when you went to the police and you took out that restraining order, they advised you to take out a restraining order?
Yes, they did, yes.
They didn't disclose any of that information?
No, we weren't told any of his background.
Bolton was eventually arrested after a 24-hour manhunt and was later jailed for at least 40 years. But a review of the case found the risk he posed to his victims was repeatedly underestimated. On one occasion, Lincolnshire police did not re-arrest him despite breaching his bail conditions after turning up at Bethany's home multiple times. The review said police failed to class Bethany and DJ as high risk, a decision which could have better protected them.
When you knew all of the history, all of the background, how did you feel towards the authorities and the police?
Totally and utterly let down. Absolutely. You can't imagine how disappointed is such a tiny word. It's more anger. His list of everything should have been in front of a judge on that last restraining order. But to be given a slap on the hand and just say, don't go near her, that means nothing to someone who's been stalking someone and is obsessed with someone. It means nothing.
What difference do you think it might have made?
My daughter would still be here and my grandson would still be here. That's all I can say. They'd still be here.
Lincolnshire police told us Bethany and DJ remain in their thoughts and always will. Since 2021, they've made a number of improvements, including additional training, a 5-fold increase in domestic abuse protection orders, and a new system to help recognise patterns of perpetrator risk.
You report something, the police take a report, they then record that report.
Louise Taylor was a police officer for 10 years and now helps survivors of domestic abuse alongside Barnsley-based charity Resolute. While she left policing in 2009, she believes the behaviours she saw from some officers then still exist today.
There were some really good officers that really dealt with domestic abuse well and really helped the victims, and there were some extremely poor officers. I was on the plainclothes unit one night and a violent domestic came in and it sounded quite severe and we were literally 2 streets away. So I said to my colleague, right, let's deal with this. We're 2 streets away. And he said, absolutely not. No, we're not getting tied up with that. If you're a police officer holding a warrant card, you have a duty to uphold the law and do whatever you should do to protect a victim of crime. And there are people that just can't be bothered.
And it's attitudes like that which the charity founder Deborah Jones says is stopping more and more women from turning to the police for help.
It's soul destroying for us as an organisation to try and navigate this system for them when they are being failed so poorly. You know, we're not seeing domestic violence protection orders being implemented. Then, you know, there's no action if a non-molestation order is breached. And I've said numerous times, you know, these orders are not worth the paper they're written on, basically.
It's thought around a quarter of domestic abuse is never reported. For those who do report it, reaching that point can often take months, if not years.
But in some cases where police are in a position to take action, we've heard women have been left without protection simply because police officers haven't acted swiftly enough to charge, and then a legal loophole means they're no longer able to do so.
He strangled me. He bit me. He gave me a black eye. It was physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. And it's just the thought, you know, that he's got away with it.
This is just one of the many injuries Kelsey's ex-partner inflicted upon her. For months, she endured his abuse, too scared to press charges against him. But after one particularly brutal night, she finally went to the police.
I had called the police a number of times and they were well aware of what was going on. They turned up one day and said, "We're here, we've got everything put in place for when you're ready to leave." And so I finally decided to leave him after one night of hell, and so he was arrested.
She thought that was the start of her journey to seek justice, but those who were supposed to protect her, she says, completely failed.
We've seen evidence that following the arrest of Kelsey's ex-partner, the Crown Prosecution Service advised the police to charge him with a number of assaults. Now, the law means assault charges have to be brought within a certain amount of time. And by the time the CPS had reviewed the case, North Yorkshire Police had 9 days to charge him. But they did not do so for a further 3 weeks, meaning the assault charges were out of time and ultimately had to be dropped.
It meant the perpetrator received a suspended sentence, and Kelsey was left so traumatised by the ordeal, she's since been diagnosed with PTSD.
How let down do you feel?
Really let down. Really let down. And I don't think I will ever be able to trust the police ever again now. That's it. You turn to the police for help. That's what they're there for. That's their job. And they say they take domestic abuse so seriously. And in my eyes, I don't believe a word.
North Yorkshire Police told us because a formal complaint has been submitted, it would be inappropriate to comment while that investigation is ongoing. But what about other tools available to protect women, which simply don't seem to be fit for purpose? Stalking protection orders were introduced in 2020 as a supercharged power over that of a restraining order. If breached, they can lead to a criminal offence. But when Gracie Spinks died near Chesterfield in 2021 at the hands of her stalker, a man she'd already reported to police, it raised concerns about how police forces around the country handle and investigate reports of stalking. In the years since Gracie was killed, Derbyshire Constabulary set up this dedicated stalking unit. Our research has found here they're applying for 12 times as many stalking protection orders as some of their neighbours.
We've actually recruited a dedicated stalking coordinator. There was a police staff member been in post for a couple of years, and she's become almost like a subject matter expert to help officers apply for the orders. And we've actually got a dedicated team that's looking at testing compliance with it.
They're now hoping what they've learned will help other police forces use these orders to their full potential and end the inconsistent approach when it comes to stalking protection.
Throughout this investigation, we've spoken to women who've told us that inconsistent approach comes up time and time again. How is it that 18 women were killed by men already known to the police? I put that to the Home Secretary.
Well, I think this is really serious because we've got to have much stronger action against domestic abuse, stalking, this serious violence against women and girls. And that means we need an overhaul of the way in which policing responds. We want to see domestic abuse experts in 999 control centres, so they hear what's going on. We need to have a training overhaul for policing and also new protection orders in place so stronger action is taken. We have to make it a mission to halve the level of violence against women and girls over the next 10 years, and I'm determined to do that.
Some women, quite a few women, have come forward. They've told us that police didn't listen to them, they filled in forms wrong, sometimes they didn't even log the crime. How are you going to change that culture?
Well, I think violence against women and girls, and particularly things like domestic abuse or sexual assaults and stalking, have not been taken seriously by policing for far too long. We have to change that. And that means we're bringing in new requirements on training on these sorts of crimes for police officers across the country, but also a requirement to have domestic abuse experts in the 999 control room. So you have to have action locally and experts who know how serious these crimes are, with new powers, new protection orders. We've got to have action across the board.
The body which outlines policing priorities, the National Police Chiefs Council, says violence against women and girls is a national emergency. They told us they're committed to driving improvements to the police response to domestic abuse and that they must work harder to meet the needs of victims and improve prosecutions. But they also acknowledge that domestic abuse is a complex societal issue, which policing alone cannot solve. Decades of systemic misogyny, experts say, will take years to unlearn. And in South Yorkshire, one charity believes helping perpetrators is central to that. Every week, in this room, men sit and talk about how they've abused their partners. Some will have violently attacked them, others manipulated and controlled them. All say they have a desire to change.
I was controlling with money. I was domineering. It was my way or no way. Even kicking things. And whilst I never considered that to be physical abuse, in actual fact, it is, because it's kind of the intimation that if you don't do what I'm saying, you're going to be next.
Jack has been married to Sarah for 15 years. They're not their real names as we're protecting their identities. 3 years ago, their relationship hit crisis point when Sarah realised Jack was abusing her. To hear their personal reflections of that time, we interviewed them separately.
He used to sort of belittle me at times. Like swear words he would call me and say that I was useless at most things in the house. So it got to the point where I didn't want to do anything in the house because I was frightened if I didn't do it his way, because it had to be his way or he lost his temper. It wasn't until I went for counselling for something else, bereavement, that I opened up about certain things my husband did. And she said, I'm not saying you're in an abusive relationship, but... And then as soon as she said that, I thought, yes, I am.
So Sarah told Jack if he didn't seek help for his behaviour, she was going to leave. It was then he found the Inspire to Change programme led by the charity Cranston, a 6-month programme to help abusers unpick behaviour and break the cycle of abuse.
They're just so simple, some of the things that they teach and show you, but they're things I think many men would just miss in their normal everyday life.
Why do you think you didn't recognise that what you were doing was abusive?
There's no real reason why I didn't recognise it. I can't answer that. All I can say is society's got a certain image of a man, and this is handed down generation after generation, and we've got to look at how, as a society, generally, we teach young men.
That is central to perpetrator intervention schemes, and for those who run them, the belief they are essential in helping tackle domestic abuse.
If we're not looking at the person that's doing the behaviour, taking the accountability and responsibility for their behaviour, then how can things change?
a lot of the individuals that we get on the groups are not just partners, but they're also parents. So if they start to address and tackle their own and change their own behaviour, the hope is that their children then see that, and that then breaks that cycle of sort of inherited attitudes and beliefs that gets passed down generation after generation.
But funding for sessions like these can be a postcode lottery. Here in Rotherham, they're supported by both the local and combined authorities. But over in Huddersfield, a similar course has been suspended because all funding from Kirklees Council has been cut. I sent Freedom of Information requests to all local authorities in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire to ask about their total domestic abuse budgets, and the results are hugely varied. In Calderdale, their budget increased by 52% from 2022 to 2024, and in Lincolnshire, it went up by 37% in the same period. But at the other end of the scale, North Yorkshire's budget stayed exactly the same, whereas in Kirklees, the budget was actually cut by 24%. Kirklees Council says its overall budget has not been reduced due to other sources of funding, but for Noreen and Erica, who work for the largest domestic abuse charity in Yorkshire, they say demand for their services has doubled in the last 5 years, but funding is on a knife edge.
We're in a position that some additional funding that's been given throughout the sector is due to end at the end of March 2025. The impact that will have is absolutely massive. We might be looking at reducing our staffing, which will impact the support we can provide, which will be detrimental to the safety of our survivors.
We're hoping we get an extension on that funding, but at this moment we are at those crossroads where we don't know what the future looks like in terms of funding.
But why is demand increasing so much? Criminologist Dr. Sam Lewis leads a team at the University of Leeds which researches violence against women and girls.
I think there is a great deal more awareness, which is fantastic, and the more we talk about it, the more people will be able to report their experiences. But often, I think, if we go back far enough, people didn't have ways of meeting other people with similar misogynistic attitudes. Now, online, you can meet people who share your perhaps very negative, very misogynistic interests or beliefs. And so I think the online environment has created a really dangerous space, and those kinds of environments leak out into broader society.
We've been able to bring to light some of these police failings partly because domestic killings are recognised by national data. But in cases where victims end their own lives following domestic abuse, there is no database. In fact, it's thought only one suicide in the UK has ever had domestic abuse listed as an underlying cause.
I believed with all my heart that my daughter wanted to live. But what she couldn't do was live that life of coercive control and domestic abuse.
Phyllis's daughter Jessie took her own life in 2018. After Phyllis fought for 5 years to prove domestic abuse was a major factor, a coroner explicitly linked it as an underlying cause.
From day one, when Jessica took her life, I have fought and battled against all agencies, all people around, to say I knew this was wrong. But we were very fortunate that the coroner we did get could see where I was coming from. She understood.
But the inquest at Hull Coroner's Court also heard there were huge failings by all the authorities. When Jessie fled South Yorkshire to move close to her family, her ex-partner managed to track her down. She went to Humberside Police, but they downgraded her risk from high to medium. Only this year has Phyllis received a formal apology.
I needed them to say sorry. I needed them to say sorry so I thought they would learn by what they didn't do.
Humberside Police told us their thoughts remain with Jessica and her loved ones. They fully accept her reports of domestic abuse were not handled as fully and appropriately as they could have been, and have since made numerous improvements, including in their risk assessment process. Phyllis is now campaigning for a change in how suicides following recognised domestic abuse are recorded, so society knows just how many are being failed.
What is it that drives you to do all the work that you're doing now?
The love of my Jessie. I can't bring my Jessie back, but I'd like Jessie to be proud to think I helped somebody else, and if I can save somebody else or educate the professionals in how to do their job better, then by doing that, I can hopefully save some other people.